Move forward on the transmission replacement on the Grand Prix, the problem child that I picked up as a project. It's a California edition, and the problem with that is the air pump, and the thing gets in the way, and you think you can work around it and do all this work while leaving it in place, but don't save your time. I mean, don't waste your time. Sorry. Just get that thing out of there right away, and don't yank it out by the hose. The plastic will break. Move that thing out of the way and then put it back in when you're done. We did get the transmission replaced and it drives just fine, so now we have a couple other little things that we have to fix on it, and the problem child to be done. Hi guys, another project. I took this one on just for fun, I guess. Got another Grand Prix here. Needs a transmission. I got it pretty cheap, and I was able to find a transmission. But the 06 Grand Prix is a single year transmission. It only fits 06 Grand Prix, no other cars. And it may be something silly like a connector for a plug or something, you know, that you could probably switch from another transmission, but I wasn't gonna mess around. I got one, used one to put in here. So this one is not too bad. It's got a little bit of surface rust there starting, so but overall it's in pretty decent condition. So I've started taking off some of the stuff on the top, the crossbars, support bars, and then we're going to take some of this stuff out so we can get at the bolts on the transmission easier. We're going to do this before we jack it up, because we have to drop the subframe. The subframe, in order to drop that, you have to have the car up pretty high, so I thought we'd work on the top side here first. Loosened up the clamp on there and took the this part of the air cleaner out. Now we can get at the plug. Plug this. You squeeze it on both sides, and then it comes unplugged. Next we have this linkage. Okay, then on the shifter linkage, I got a 15mm nut that holds that on, and I'm just going to pull that off from there. Okay, so I've decided to just take the whole bracket off and leave the linkage in place. I've got the nut off of the shifter on the transmission, and I'm just going to pull these out. Oh, you can see there is one of the bolts. Transmission bolt. We pulled that one out. We pulled the one out. You can see that one on the other side, and the one down there. So the top three are out. We still have to do the one that came in from the back side. Next, I'm working on removing this air pump off of the transmission. The bracket's bolted to the transmission, so we want to pull that away from there. Jacked it up, making sure that the jack stands are on the body, not on the subframe. Since we have to drop down the subframe, it wouldn't do much good to put the jack stands underneath that. So next we're going to start removing stuff off the bottom here. We got the starter and the cover plates and stuff, and then we can get into the torque converter bolts. We have the starter torque converter access cover bolts, so we have that one and that one to pull off the cover. Okay, there's also underneath the starter, this cover plate has another bolt right there that's also 10mm. So we have to take the mount on the bottom here. There's 3 bolts that hold that on. We can take just the one, but then it's kind of still in our way, so we're going to pull all 3 of them out. Okay, with my bracket out of the way, cover plate just pulls down and you can access the torque converter there. And then we can pull the starter of the way. I've disconnected the battery, so all we have to do is drop the 2 bolts there. Place a transmission. I replaced the seals. The front seal, I have a new one for here. The output shaft seal on the right side, passenger side. And then over here is the one for the driver's side or left side. And I have 3 brand new seals here. On this one I just used a screwdriver and kind of cut a slit in there like a can opener, and then I was able to collapse it a bit, and then it just pops right out. On the new one, to install it, what I used is a piece of 2-inch PVC. Like that. Probably should have been a little bit bigger, but it popped right in real easy that way. With all 3 seals installed, I think this is ready to go in. We're probably going to do a transmission fluid change after we check and verify and make sure that it's a good transmission. And then we'll probably throw in a new filter and all that after it's run for a little bit. Now we're working on getting the subframe lowered down. I took the nut off of this bracket, and then I also have 2 bolts here on the front. Both of those are out, and so now we can remove the bracket. There's one on each side. Now we can access the 18mm bolt behind that bracket. Pull the 2 front ones down. We're jacking up the subframe on this side here, and then we're going to remove these 2 bolts on this. Oh, stop. That's high enough. We're just going to remove the bolts and then lower it down and set it on jack stands on this side, and then we're going to work on the other side. We did go in with a bunch of long extensions, and if you go in right through here, you can get that last transmission bolt out. It's an 18mm. You got to go all the way in there and feel around until all your extensions stop turning, and then you know you're on the bolt. Next, we're removing the 2 nuts on the transmission mount. This is the shock absorber in between there on this bracket. 15mm nuts are off of there, and then we're going to take the axle nuts off because we have to remove the axles. We also have to take the ball joint loose to get swing this out of the way. Axle pushed back in there. We have that loose, and I pushed it back in there, and that gives you more room to put the box end wrench on your castle nut. And then I've extended that with another wrench to get that one loose. I did get the cotter pin out first to make it a lot easier. Since we're lowering the subframe, and this has the buttons in the steering wheel, we need to make sure that the steering wheel does not spin at all. So I'm placing a strap like that, and that'll keep the steering wheel from moving, so we don't ruin the clock spring in there. Okay, with the steering wheel straight, you should be able to get at the bolt that holds that linkage to the rack and pinion assembly. And I centered it first so that you can get it back in there when you put it back in. I'm using an 11mm socket and a ratchet. The subframe a bit with the jack, and I've pounded on the side of that a bit to get that ball joint loose. Now we can swing this out of the way, and now we have to take the axle shaft out. And I think the best way is to use one of these little flat pry bars and get behind it like that and pop that out of the transmission side. Okay, that popped out of there real nice, and now I took the nut off. We should be able to just push this, tap it a little bit, thing you have to disconnect here is the stabilizer link, and as you can see, this stabilizer link was shot. It just popped right off the end there, so but that has to be removed in order to lower the. We're going to work on these transmission cooling lines, the oil lines. They do have a safety clip that comes down first. A little clip comes down, and then there's a little spring clip in there. I usually just pull that back with a little screwdriver, and then those just pop out. Okay, I got the transmission lines off, and I also took off this bracket to get that out of the way. And now I have some jacks holding up the engine, and one holding up the transmission, and then I have the floor jack holding up the subframe, which we can lower out of the way, and then hopefully get this thing out through the hole here. Okay, next we have to take the rear mount off. This is, as you can see it from underneath, this goes over top of the tail shaft. The top one you can get through with some long extensions through there. The bottom one you can get with the ratchet through there. Okay, there's a bolt that goes into the side of the transmission for this air pump, and then there's also a nut up here that you have to take off. And now we're doing the bracket that holds this pipe that goes to the EGR valve off of the transmission, because I have to pull that all out of the way. Okay, so we still had one more bolt in here that had a stud on the end of it for another ground wire, so we had to take that off. We had to take these bolts out that hold the air pump, and so we got that pushed out of the way, and then there's another ground wire here that we had to remove. So all these had to come off. Yeah, I've been wiggling the transmission out. I took the plug off the speed sensor, and then as we were wiggling it out, I've been pulling the axle shaft out of there. Okay, now you can see why you have to jack the car up so high, because the subframe has to go down so low in order to get the transmission to clear the body and the subframe. From now on, it's just wiggling back and forth and prying it and getting it over that mount pad to get it out. So if you want, you can just play this video backwards, and that's how the next one goes back in. Easy as not pie. I like eating pie. This is not like eating pie. Easy as, it's not easy.